We are live with the Dynasty Roundtable podcast on Player Profiler. I am your singular host today, Matt Babich. My normal co-host, Seth Dewald, is out on vacation over there on the West Coast, living it up with his wife. So, Seth, hope you're doing well, bud. Hope you're not watching this show and you're doing something a little bit more fun on vacation. Maybe doing things that Alan described on the Sonic Truth podcast today. Always interesting to tune into that podcast and hear what he has to say. But joining me is a roundtable OG, none other than Tyler Knable, PPR Tyler. We had to have him in as soon as I knew Seth was out of town. I waited 3 to 4 days and then hit up Tyler on Monday afternoon and said, hey, can you hop on the podcast on Wednesday? So like the professional I am, getting PPR Tyler to come on. Today we're going to talk about sophomores in fantasy football. A trend is rookies doubling up on their performance from their rookie year and improving going into year two. So understanding which sophomores are going to break the mold in fantasy football is very key. So we're bringing on Tyler to discuss this. Tyler, how we doing?
I'm good. I love the Alan Sislasky shout out because you really have to watch today's episode to understand that reference. And it was a really good joke by you. And if you want to get the reference, click on the Sound of Truth. It's like literally a minute and a half in, so you don't have to go find it. It's like the first 2 minutes of the show. If you want to get that reference, go tune in the Sound of Truth. It'll all come together when you do that. But I'm doing great. Ready to talk some sophomores. I got a lot of guys on this list because obviously I do play Dynasty. I consider myself a Dynasty mind, but I'm a big redraft best ball guy, and I have a lot of good best ball takes on this that I think translate to Dynasty well. So I'm ready to just kind of hop into it.
Then let's hop right into it. The Dynasty Roundtable podcast. First of all, I like how you mentioned you have a big focus on best ball and redraft, because we had someone come through the chat last week and say, enough with the Dynasty talk, I want redraft. And I said, hey, maybe slow down and think. You can learn from Dynasty fantasy football takes and apply what you learn to win in redraft. And the same goes the opposite direction. Because what's the goal of Dynasty? Score the most points. So you have to be in tune with redraft to understand Dynasty and vice versa. So just because you don't have 10 Dynasty leagues that you're in doesn't mean you don't understand the game theory and which players are going to score the most fantasy points. So don't ever discourage or discount yourself because of, what you're labeled as. That's why you're on this podcast, because you are a Dynasty mind, because you're so in tune with best ball, with redraft, short-term production. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be a tighter show today. Probably not going to go an hour and a half, so you all can breathe a sigh of relief. Bryce Young. We're going to start with quarterbacks. I promise 2 per position. Bryce Young right now is quarterback 20. You couldn't have imagined a worse situation for him last year being in Carolina. But the market is clearly not totally out on Bryce Young with his evaluation at quarterback 20. So what do we think about Bryce Young going into year 2 with this environment change? Is he somebody who is currently undervalued? Are the Panthers in general, if we want to expand the conversation, undervalued? What are your thoughts here?
Dude, I think so. The Panthers are one of the offenses that I'm trying to get as much as I can in best ball, and that applies to Dynasty too. I just think everything went wrong for Bryce Young last year. The coaching, the talent, the O-line, the situation. Is there been a worse situation that a first overall pick has ever stepped into? Maybe the only other one I can think of recently is the Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer, 9-week experience or whatever that was. Because it's kind of the same thing where I guess maybe Bryce Young wasn't looked at as generational talent as much as Trevor Lawrence was. Trevor Lawrence, it was him and it was nobody else in that class. It was always going to be Trevor Lawrence 1 overall. But I think Bryce Young, he was the number 1 quarterback off the board. Now he's probably never going to get to that CJ Stroud level, but to just say he's terrible when he's throwing to he made Adam Thielen be like one of like the best receivers over the first half of the season last year, fantasy wise, right? And then he's throwing to Jonathan Mingo, which was a terrible pick. He's throwing to Terrace Marshall, who's like everyone's sleeper for like 2 years, and like it's just it's not happening with Terrace Marshall. Like, and then the running back like Chuba, Miles Sanders was nothing. The O line was nothing. So like last year, I don't even count it against him. I think it's just a miracle that like he had some good games. Like I think there's a couple of 300 passing yard games in there anyway. But so I'm kind of looking forward to this year, and I'm more excited about the Dave Canales part of this, where I just think he's like, you look at what he's done in his career with these quarterbacks that everyone had written off. Speaking of writing off, like with Geno Smith in Seattle, he was the guy who kind of turned his career around. Like Geno had his best year when Dave Canales was his quarterback coach. Then he goes to Tampa Bay, gets Baker Mayfield, who I don't know if you remember this time last year during OTAs, there was that viral video of him and Trask throwing like missing like open throws, and it was like a whole thing. And it was like, oh my God, the Bucs are going to be like so bad this year. Like Tank for Caleb. Like Tank for Caleb was a real thing this time last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Everyone thought they were going to be awful. And then what do? They go out, they win the division, and they go to the playoffs. They get to the divisional round. They beat the Eagles in the playoffs. So like Baker has the best year of his career. Who was the OC play caller? Dave Canales. Now Dave Canales goes to Carolina, and he has Bryce Young, who is without a doubt like the most talented quarterback he's probably ever had to work with in terms of like coming out of college pretty. Yes, I know Baker was a number one overall pick, but it feels like Bryce Young is kind of, looked at as a better prospect than Baker is. At least he probably has more potential than what we're looking at with Baker right now. So I think Dave Canales turns this whole thing around. He's not going to ask Bryce Young to carry them. He's a guy who wants to run the ball. They go out, they get Jonathan Brooks. They trade up for Jonathan Brooks, which is kind of a big no-no in terms of, you probably shouldn't trade up for a running back in the second round, especially one coming off a torn ACL. But it's very obvious they want to establish the run. They want to be able to run the ball. They go get Xavier Legette. They go get Deontay Johnson. They still have Adam Thielen. They have some pieces to compete. They also add to the O-line room in free agency. So I just don't see how this just isn't a completely different offense. I think Dave Canales is kind of the key to all this. I think he's just a really good coach. We've seen him do it with lesser talent. So I'm really excited from that aspect where I'm so in on Bryce Young. At QB20, I could not be more in at that price in terms of kind of what his dynasty value is right now.
And from a trade market perspective, as someone who's been out and traded for Bryce Young, it's actually not that hard. It's not QB20 hard to go out and get a Bryce Young. You can toss out a late first. So if you're a QB needy team in a super flex, I ended up actually trading for Baker instead of Bryce Young because I was a little bit more win now. And I had Chris Godwin. But Bryce Young and Baker Mayfield are both a late first round pick to get in a trade. And to get somebody who is valued at QB20 for just a late first round pick as a contending team is just about the easiest button I can press. When you're thinking of a rebuild team, an early second plus can get you Bryce Young and pad your quarterback situation there. If you're a true rebuild team, you probably have multiple seconds anyway. So he's a very attainable asset. And I like all the things you said. He's on my list here. So this is what, he's obviously a favorite of mine. But when the field shrinks, red zone completion percentage, number 21 in the league, pressured completion percentage, number 21, there are certain situations where Bryce Young showed promise. And if you really want to deep dive into his film, go look at Josh Norris's film study on Bryce Young, because the zip he puts on the ball, and when he was put into a situation where you can get an actual throw off and make a read, his ball placement's incredible. He has the tools to complete tight window passes in pressure. He had no surrounding talent, and that includes the coach. So this is just a complete shift in environment for him, and it's getting done early. He's getting this early in his career. So Bryce Young is an incredible buy right now. Funny enough, he was 20th in expected fantasy points per game last year. So even with that horrible environment, given his opportunity, he should have been QB20, which is why I tend to believe he's probably going to finish as a top 20 QB this year because this situation is improving. His expected fantasy points per game could be even higher, 18, 17. So even if that efficiency doesn't tick up, the fact that, the Tampa was 11th in pass percentage last year, so they're going to be passing the ball a lot, even if they do pretend, or they do lean on Jonathan Brooks in the run game. So Bryce Young, an incredible value for me right now. Right behind him at QB 21 is Mayo boy Will Levis. A similar situation here where struggled when active, but now seemingly in a completely different environment. So do we apply the same logic to Bryce Young with Will Levis?
It's an interesting situation because I think this, when you look at Will Levis for this year in terms of like this is a make or break year for him. He is either going to be the guy going forward or they're going to have to figure it out after this offseason. But what I like what the Titans have done is like there's no pretty much like there's no excuses if he fails because he's got DeAndre Hopkins, he's got Calvin Ridley, he's got Tyler Boyd / Treylon Burks, who the big thing about him today, unfortunate for him, to be playing gunner on fourth down, it looks like. So that's great for him. But then they go out, they get Tony Pollard. They still have Tyjae Spears. They invest heavy in the O-line. They signed a couple guards. They draft J.C. Latham out of Alabama. So like they have like the O-line's good, the weapons are good. Everything in that offense is like prime for him to really take the reins and take this. Like this offense is going to go as high as Will Levis takes them. It's not like Bryce Young last year where like he had no chance. We're like Will Levis is going to have every single chance to keep that job this year. Now it's just a question of whether or not you think he's going to get there. Like he was locked in as a top 4. This is the difference between Will Levis and Bryce Young. Like Bryce Young, without a doubt, the number 1 pick, at least going into last year. Like wasn't really a question. It was going to be Bryce Young. Will Levis was betting odds on draft night was like minus like 1,500 to be a top 4 pick. And he falls out of the first round into the second. So it's just like, it's crazy when you look at that, where it's like he doesn't have the same prospect profile, but he kind of does because he's being talked about like that. But the NFL really showed you what they thought of Will Levis. So he doesn't have the same prospect profile as Bryce Young. That being said, he is a good runner. So I think that's great for fantasy in terms of what you're looking for this year. But going forward, like it's just such like a coin flip because I could see either one. Like I don't think we saw like the offense this is an entirely different offense too. Like this offense could be a lot more pass heavy. This isn't the Derrick Henry, like we're gonna give Derrick Henry the ball 20 times a game type of offense that you have seen the past like 4 or 5 years in Tennessee. This isn't a Vrabel offense anymore. This is a Callahan offense. He's going to come in. It's going to be a lot more balanced, a lot more throwing. So it's just whether or not like this offense is going to go completely dependent on how good Will Levis is and making those reads and being a passer, because I think he has the tools to be it. We just haven't seen it really all put together yet. We didn't really see that Kentucky. We didn't see it last year. He had some flashes. The first start he had was a 4-touchdown game. So we've seen the flashes there. And it's just, is he going to put it all together? I don't know. He's quarterback 21 on Keep Trade Cut. Bryce Young's QB 20. If we're doing a little comparison, I'd much rather have Bryce Young, but I think that upside's a little higher than Bryce Young because he does have that big body frame, running ability. Like he's kind of a football like freak where like he's gonna like dive for like a first down if he's like 10 yards away. Like he's just kind of how he's built. He's a football guy, but I like Will Levis. I see the upside, but I think Bryce Young is just going to be a much more, I would say, complete product and safer option to, kind of take that step forward that we're expecting in 2024.
The funny thing is, for me, I don't even think he has to necessarily put it together, because what happens in last year, first of all, what's interesting is Will Levis was 23rd in receiver drops in only 9 games. So I didn't have time to put that number together, but I would imagine if you do drops per game, it's probably up there. It's probably in the 16 range. So his supporting cast was not helping him. He really only had DeAndre Hopkins. Even Chigakonkwo, if you actually were watching the games or had any Chigakonkwo in fantasy, he was not very reliable as a pass catcher. He was dropping some easy ones. And it's honestly because I really don't know if they were used to a quarterback who could throw that hard. Besides DeAndre Hopkins, because he's DeAndre Hopkins and doesn't need to be. But he just has a missile, and I want to pull something up real quick. There's just not many quarterbacks in the league that can do this.
Okay, here we go.
How many quarterbacks can just wrist flick, dropped pass too?
Yeah,
I'm not sure who that was, but I mean, he just takes a few steps back and flicks a 60-yard dime. Treylon Burks just absolutely fumbles the bag. There are not a lot of quarterbacks in the league that can do that. And now he's getting somebody off the Sean McVay, I believe, coaching tree, the former OC of the Cincinnati Bengals. as his head coach. They go out and get Tyler Boyd, who's still very serviceable, and Calvin Ridley, honestly rolling out one of the more, dare I say, underrated wide receiver trios in the league. In 2 years ago, if you said those three, people would say that's a top 3, top 5 receiving core in the league. Yeah, they've all aged a couple of years, but they're still really talented. So Levis is going to get that support. He even gets Pollard, who's a more serviceable pass catching back than Henry. So for all the reasons we love Bryce Young, you honestly have to love Will Levis even more. It's just that his head coach hasn't proven that he can really be that offensive igniter that Dave Canales has. But I think it's a good bet to make and a reason why he's honestly a better value at cost. Now, the one thing I'll say about Bryce Young in the upside, a little interesting tidbit, Bryce Young finished 11th among quarterbacks in total rushing yards last year. So maybe that's a false signal, just given how bad the offensive line was and how bad that team is. But maybe some sneaky rushing upside from Bryce Young, some scramble Mahomesian rushing upside. Levis hasn't necessarily shown that yet, but he has shown the will to run. But both of these quarterbacks are phenomenal buys right now. I truly believe Will Levis, I'm not as sure on, but if these quarterbacks have the seasons that they could have as sophomores, they're both going to be top 17 assets. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to the quarterback market there with some of the names that are going to have to get pushed out. You would imagine a Kirk Cousins starts to fall out, maybe an Aaron Rodgers, depending on where they're ranked. But anything to add on this quarterback conversation before we kick it to a short break?
Yeah, real quick on the Levis thing. One of the discourses that I kind of like that surrounds him is like people wonder if he's too jacked to play quarterback, like because he is freaking ripped. Like he's sculpted. Like he's just absolutely like he's a strong guy, and that's great for those deep balls, the clip that you showed. But those that's the muscle is where it kind of affects that short intermediate range, and I feel like. But when we saw with Hopkins last year, so I'm not saying it's a big concern, but it's just kind of a discourse that I like talking about with Will Levis because he probably is the most jacked quarterback in the league. I can't think of another one in terms of just looks like he could just beat everybody up like a D lineman. Like he's huge, but that's kind of the only Will Levis thing I wanted to add is I think the jackness does impact some of those short to intermediate throws in terms of accuracy. So I don't think accuracy is his play is his calling card. I don't think he can just throw the ball 45 times a game, beat you with his mind, beat you with his arm. I think it's kind of you got to choose your spots with Will Levis, but yeah.
We will be right back with running backs right after this quick message.
This episode is brought to you by Player Profiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help you strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty Guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our Rookie Guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. I mean, it's a great deal.
It is a great deal. Go get the Dynasty Dominator and Dynasty Deluxe. Now that I think about it, the trade analyzer is annoying just because of what he said, because it won't let you even contemplate tricking your league mates into just stacking up third, fourth round picks. Just continues to get worse for that side of the deal. You're like, what if I throw in a fourth? Third. And so it is true to life, and maybe you can trick your league mates, but it is true to life where it does value that actual roster position. Real quick on the comments, GDLT, first, thank you for tuning into the show. We are entertaining an outcome where it could work out for the Raiders. Devontae Adams is one of my favorite picks in this draft, as is Jacoby Myers. but AOC is not going to be the quarterback. Like that's the argument here. Not that the Raiders can be good, but that AOC is going to be the starting quarterback for the Raiders. Because I don't know. Do you think he dethrones Minshew, or do you think Minshew dethrones AOC? I should say.
No, I think AOC's got more worried about like presidential elections and all that kind of stuff coming out. Just kidding. That was a terrible joke.
Eating the rich.
Yes, tax the rich.
I have a Met Gala meme with AOC and her tax the rich or eat the rich dress or whatever with Aiden O'Connell's face on it. Got 0 likes on Twitter, but it made me laugh. So
that's awesome. I didn't see that. If I saw it, I definitely would have liked it.
It was like 2 years ago after
a
random win versus Illinois. Like not something I should ever have to celebrate, but that's life of a Purdue.
Oh, because he's a Purdue guy. There it is. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. It was back at Purdue.
Got you. Back in the Purdue days. But yeah, I think no. This is Gardner, man. They like you look at what this team wants. Like Pierce isn't sticking around for a rebuild. I think they truly think that they can win now. Like they have veteran guys who want to win. This isn't like a young team. This is a team that wants to win right now. Like they want to roll. Like Devontae's been probably sold the dream. Like, yo, we're not going to like rebuild. Like we want to win. I think Gardner gives you a better chance to win than anybody. Like, is he going to lead you to a Super Bowl? No, but is he going to could he get you to the playoffs? Like what roster do you think is better like this year? The Raiders or the Colts? Like, I would probably take the Raiders in terms of their offense and defense. The Colts defense last year was awful. Like literally, like their pass defense was awful. I think the Raiders have a little bit better defense than when you got Crosby on there. I mean, you're probably better defense anyways, but I think this, like, look at the way the Raiders closed the season too. Like, didn't they rattle off like 6 straight wins or something? Like they were almost kind of snuck it in the playoffs there at the end. So I think Pierce is selling the dream that this team's going to at least compete, try and sneak in the playoffs, maybe as like a wild card. And I don't think you're going to get there with O'Connell. Yeah, we said they kind of read off a win streak when he was starting, but I think Gardner is the much better quarterback. I think he's going to be huge for guys like Jacoby Myers. Look what Josh Downs did when Gardner was there, and like look at what Pittman was when Gardner was there. I just think that he gives you the better chance to win, and that's why they kind of brought him in and signed him there. So I think it's going to be Gardner, not AOC.
We're going to transition to running backs here with our sophomore values, and we're going to stay with the Titans and talk about their sophomore running back. They brought in Tony Pollard after the exit of Derrick Henry. Tyjae Spears is now valued at RB20, but has a lot of excitement around him. So, Tyler, is the upside of Tyjae Spears worth the investment price right now?
I think so, man. I think Tyjae Spears is a really, really good running back. You look at like what he did last year. Like I think we could say like pretty safely, Derrick Henry was a pretty good, like a good running back last year, like very good running back. Not what he used to be in his prime. Like his prime's Hall of Fame, but like right now he's still like a really good running back. Tyjae Spears outsnapped Derrick Henry in 9 of the, so they actually all played 18 games. Like both of them all, like that was a crazy stat. Like usually running backs don't play 18 games anymore, but both of them played 18. So in 18 games this year, one of the games was like pretty much a 50-50 snap share, but the other 17, Spears outsnapped Henry in 9 of those 17 games. So 9-8 pretty much, where like it's pretty much still kind of 50-50, but to get on the field with Derrick Henry, even though like they were kind of losing a lot of those games, but no other running backs ever really done that. Like how many times have we tried to kind of get that handcuff running back to Derrick Henry and never worked out? Hassan Haskins, Darrington Evans, Deion Lewis kind of in those early years. Like there was never a second running back in Tennessee in this offense, and Tyjae Spears managed to get on the field when a lot of other running backs couldn't. So I think he's a really good player. Yeah, you're kind of, if you're looking more long-term, that he may have an ACL, he may not. I think that's kind of up for debate right now. But so he could people are kind of speculating he could run into those knee problems that Todd Gurley had in his career, which cut his career way shorter than it should have been. But I really like Spears. The RB20 is kind of a steep price. I really like him in best ball. The RB20 is kind of where it's like you're not really getting a discount at RB20. So I like Spears. I think he's worth the buy. I just think he's a really good player. But where are you at on Spears?
So this is the same way I kind of tried to attack the James Cook situation last year. It is a different situation, but bear with me. So last year, Tyjae Spears, first of all, look through the efficiency metrics it is just a smorgasbord of elite production. So that in and of itself, we know ACL or no ACL, right now Tyjae Spears is an incredible running back, incredible pass catcher. He was 9th in total targets last year, earning 4 per game at a 14.7 target share, number 7th among running backs. Enter Tony Pollard, who is a better pass catcher than Derrick Henry, but the environment change, the personnel change, this team's going to be throwing the ball more. So maybe he doesn't settle at a 15% target share. I think it could still be close, but I think he still settles around 4.5 targets per game. I think that's pretty safe given what we expect from this team. Now, weighted opportunities, which is highly correlative of fantasy points per game, is simplistically constructed of targets, red zone carries, and then obviously everything past that is weighted a little bit less. But red zone touches, he was 54th among running backs, only 2 goal line touches. Well, you couldn't get a more favorable outcome than swapping out Derrick Henry for Tony Pollard. So he's going to be closer to top 30 in red zone touches. And he's going to get more carries without, 28 carry Derrick Henry looming around. So his weighted opportunities per game, he ranked 31st in total weighted opportunities, around 10 per game. I expect around 12.5 to 13, which means depending on how touchdowns work in or against his favor, he's going to be a top 24 back, which is why I'm okay paying that RB20 price. Because if Pollard really is declining at the rate he looked to potentially be last year, he could be a top 16, 15 running back. He has crazy upside in this offense. And that's why I'm willing to pay a little bit of a premium on Tyjae Spears, because you mentioned the knee injuries derailed Todd Gurley's career. After 3 to 4 years of mind-numbing, mind-blowing dominance, I mean, he is still like 6th overall among most touchdowns scored since 2012, and he hasn't played since like 2019. I'm horrifically misquoting that graphic, but his production in that run was just absolutely insane. So Tyjae Spears is, even though he's at RB20, the upside is far greater. And if you're looking to take a home run swing, then Spears is the guy, because I think he is a relatively insulated asset going into next year as well.
Yes, I think the only thing with Spears is like how many touchdowns is he going to score? It kind of all comes back to, he's going to catch a ton of passes. He's going to be electric, but does he get used? He just doesn't have that goal line size kind of, like he doesn't have the goal line size is what I should say. And Pollard, who like ironically never got used in the red zone because he was always with Zeke in Dallas. So like it's good. I think we might see a little role reversal in terms of Pollard, where like now Pollard might be like the bigger back there. So he might get more of the goal line carries, even though he's not like a huge back. But like Spears, I think if he scores like, even just like 7-8 touchdowns this year, like that's a really good number for, I think, a guy at his size. So I think the goal line carries might be the only thing that I'm a little scared about with him. But everything else, like he's really good with the football in his hands. He can run. It's not like he's just a gadget guy who can just catch passes. He can run the ball. So I think we're pretty lockstep on Spears, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Do you want to go Kendre Miller or Devon Achane next?
Let's Kendre Miller.
All right, let's talk about Kendre Miller. So quick note, buy Devon Achane at RB7. He should be RB5. He's RB7. Go buy him. Kendre Miller, currently valued at RB29, had a couple of spots last year where he was able to show some production, but overall, Alvin Kamara's still there. The offense fairly remained the same. So what do we think about Kendre Miller at RB29? Is he someone who's going to take a step in year 2?
I really like Kendre Miller. I loved him coming out of TCU last year. I had so much of him on so many teams. I think it was just a really weird rookie year where like he was hurt coming into the whole process. He didn't run the 40 or anything like that because he had I believe it was a hip or a knee injury that he sustained in the college football playoffs. So he didn't get to do a lot of the pre-draft stuff. So like his hype was kind of down. Still gets taken in the 3rd round because of his body of work of what he did at TCU. It's kind of funny that he like people were like, I like Zach Evans over Kendre Miller, but Kendre Miller ran Zach Evans out of town. So I thought that was always kind of a fun argument to have last year. Where like now you see why, because Zach Evans is going to be out of the league in 2 years, and Kendre Miller is the guy we're talking about right now. So Kendre Miller is you mentioned that like kind of he had a couple like spot like plays where he played okay. He just didn't get that much opportunity. He had 2 games where he had 12 or more touches last year, just 2. The 2 games, it was 12 carries, 12 carries, 4 catches, and 90 total yards. The other one was 13 carries, 1 catch, 79 total yards, and a touchdown. Like for the considering the amount of work he got, like those are pretty good stats. So.
That was RB16 and RB13. I had the same note prepared.
Yes, so it's like this guy, like I think when he gets the ball, he's going to be good. And like, are they going to use Kamara like they've used him? You know, like I feel like last year was kind of the one of like pretty much the first year where it's like, okay, Kamara's actually going to be like a 3-down guy. Where like we always seen him with Mark Ingram, with Latavius Murray, like with these other guys. And I think Kamara like that was the most work he's pretty much ever gotten, at least on a per game basis, than we've seen usually. But if you're looking more long term, Kamara's he's not going to be there next year. I just don't see a scenario where he doesn't, like, he's going to get cut. They'll save, I think it's around, I have the number here. They will save $19 million if they cut him next year. $19 million. So I just don't see how he's on the team next year. I don't think they're going to want to, they're going to have to pay him $29 million if they want to keep, like, if they want to keep him. So I just don't see how that happens. So Kendre Miller going into next year, unless they draft, someone extra high, but like he has a role going forward. I think he's going to get a lot of run this year. I think the Jamal Williams part of it last year kind of, where like he was expected to kind of be the guy, got a lot of run early, but then like Jamal Williams scored his first touchdown of the season in the last game of the season. So I don't think you have to worry about Jamal Williams in any respect, but yeah, so I'm in on Kendre, especially at that price. Like he has that kind of 3-down size. Like he is a bigger back. He's really fast. He's good with the ball in his hands. So I'm all in on Kendre Miller. Redraft, dynasty, doesn't matter. I like him at both prices. So I'm in on Kendre.
Yeah, I think this is a luxury play for dynasty teams. I think this is, if you're an RB needy team, I don't think this is the move for you. But if you maybe want to increase your window of RB production with a depth add, and you have a lot of capital maybe at receiver, draft picks, whatever it may be, this isn't necessarily I need a running back to be a top 30 player this year, I'm going to go out and get Kendre Miller. I think it's exactly how you laid it out, where it is more of a 2-year play, but he has a ton of upside in year 2, because why would the New Orleans Saints rush Kendre Miller into a big workload? He missed all of training camp, almost all of training camp. When he came back for preseason, he almost immediately had a hamstring injury in that leg because probably came back a little too fast. And the team right there said, okay, we got 2 years left on Kamara's deal. There's no way we're going to take our 3rd-round draft pick and just send him out to the Wolves on this terrible team. We're watching these carries with Alvin Kamara. We're seeing where he's getting hit. It's behind the line of scrimmage. Even on the dump downs, like 1-yard dump off, crack right in the back. Alvin Kamara, 1-yard gain. A nice 1.1 PPR points, but not exactly how the team's trying to draw up success. So if this team looks to get better, Kamara is going to get less of those meaningless dump downs and those PPR, Tristan Thompson empty stat pads. Kendre Miller is going to get an actual workload now that he's fully healthy, full offseason to pick up the schedule and or pick up the offense and practice with the team, get those reps. Kamara can't keep getting away with this, especially being as inefficient as he was. And Kendre Miller, well, he didn't qualify, he didn't have enough touches. A 2.44 yards per route run, very good. A 4.49 yards created per touch, very good. 5.4 yards per touch, good. 3.8 true yards per carry, pretty darn good. So the peripherals are there for Kendre Miller. He's just got to get the opportunity, and I think you laid out the case as to how that's going to come about. So I am in at buying Kendre Miller, albeit he's probably the riskiest asset on this list.
he definitely is the riskiest asset because he is behind Kamara. Like, what if Kamara, he wants to finish his career in New Orleans? Like, maybe he does take a pay cut. I don't see that happening. I think he's playing somewhere else next year, in 2025, I should say, not to get anyone confused. But yeah, definitely a risky asset. I think it's just going to come down to how many carries this guy going to get. I think at least in redraft, I think Kamara and Miller are both good buys. Like, they're like, I'm buying both of them because one of these guys is going to hit. You got Kubiak coming over too. He's the new OC. It's Clint Kubiak, not Gary Kubiak. Clint Kubiak is the OC in New Orleans. So it'll be a little bit of a different look of offense. He came from Minnesota, went to Denver, was in San Francisco last year. So he was kind of like around for like the Dalvin Cook stuff in Minnesota, then obviously San Francisco last year. So he knows, I think he's a good offensive mind. So I think he'll get the most out of kind of his best weapons on the team. And I think if you're going down the list, you're looking at just offensive weapons. I mean, you got Olave, you got Kamara, you can sneak in Taysom Hill, but I think Kendra Miller's got to be high up on that list too.
Perfect. We're running slightly behind schedule. I know no one's surprised there, but we're going to move on now to our wide receivers. And so we're talking about how these running backs already have a little bit of a premium on their value. I think the dynasty market is now catching up to what they expect out of these sophomores, especially those with high draft capital. But let's talk about Jordan Addison, Minnesota Vikings receiver, broke through a little bit last year. Overall was fairly disappointing, but now has a wide receiver 24 evaluation. Is this a correct evaluation of what we should expect for Jordan Addison going into year 2? Ooh, we might have our first disagreement.
It's so Addison, man, you love what you saw last year. He had, I think it was 8 touchdowns last year. That could be a wrong number. Don't quote me on that one, but he had a really good rookie season, right? And I think part of that was due to JJ was out, Hockenson was out at the very end, and it just, there wasn't as much, target competition at times in this Minnesota offense because JJ did miss, I think it was like close to like 9-10 weeks or something like that. So Addison and Hockenson were kind of the guys for a little bit there. Kirk Cousins was there too. They were throwing, I think Kirk Cousins was on pace to throw the most passing attempts he's ever had in his career. So like, I mean, there was no running game whatsoever. None. It was Alexander Madison was like, he was a value, then he was an absolute fade that as soon as his price got up there, he didn't score a single touchdown all year. Alexander Madison did. Then you have Ty Chandler. Like, there was no running game last year. So like last year's offense, I feel like is kind of fluky because there's just no way we see that passing volume ever again, at least not this year, at least. And I think they have Aaron Jones. They still have Ty Chandler, who I think is good. And I think they're going to see a much more of a running game. Also, too, if you're just looking at a long-term perspective on Addison, his upside is pretty capped because they just signed JJ, so he's locked in through 2026 for sure. There could be an out in 2027. I'm kind of a contract bro, so I always like to look at the contracts and see when guys could get out of whatever. But JJ, actually, he could be cut and the team would save $40 million, which is just insane to think about, at least the way the deal is right now. So JJ is signed forever, pretty much. TJ Hockenson, coming off the ACL, may not start kind of the season, but if we're looking at a dynasty perspective, we're kind of playing like 2 to 3 year windows. He's going to be on the team through 2025. They can cut him in 2026 and then 2027, but he's probably going to be on the team through 2026. So that's another couple of years, right? They have McCarthy as their quarterback, kind of as the guy going forward. I know you're not sold on McCarthy as a overall talent. So there's just a lot of things where like it's and the market is kind of correct on this because if they were just projecting his season and kind of saying he's going to be better next season, I think he'd be a little bit higher on this list. But wide receiver 20, and I kind of had it in my notes as compared to the next guy that you had highlighted on the sheet. And we can get there when we get there. But I really like the other guy in the sheet over Addison for all the reasons I listed. I think it's going to be hard for him to get targets. The passing volume is not going to be there. I don't know what it looks like going forward without Kirk, with all these weapons still there and under contract. I just think he, like some games, like he probably is like the number 3 guy, maybe number 4 guy if Aaron Jones gets going. Like I just think he could get lost in the shuffle on a team that is not projected to have as many pass attempts as they had last year.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a slightly different look at things where we're talking about what's going to happen with Jordan Addison in year 2. And even though Kirk Cousins is gone, I think a little bit of a perfect storm for Jordan Addison, where TJ Hockenson got a very, very late in the season ACL injury. So it's going to take a long time before he's back. It's going to be at least 3/4 of the season before Hawkinson is fully re-immersed into this Vikings offense. So we look at KJ Osborne leaving. No one really coming in through the draft. Aaron Jones now is in the running back slot, so an actual target earner is there. But we're going to see one of the most consolidated target shares this season between Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And so that's where I almost lean to, I don't really care if I think Jordan Addison is that good. He's probably going to be top 20 in target share just because of the situation in Minnesota. And Kevin O'Connell, no matter who has been behind this offense, who's been under center, it's been a faster pace, pass first offense. He did this shit with Case Keenum. He'll do it with Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy. And I don't think JJ McCarthy is a game-breaking fantasy asset. But even in Brock Purdy's rookie season, when the fantasy production wasn't elite, but he was sustaining Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk in some weeks as elite fantasy assets. So that's what I think can happen this year, where we're overreacting on the quarterback. I would, if JJ McCarthy plays a long stretch of games, I'm not expecting him to finish highly in fantasy points per game, but I'm expecting him to be good enough to sustain production for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So wide receiver 24 is a little pricey, and I'm willing to say that. So at market value, it is tougher to buy Jordan Addison because of the longer term play. What's going to happen after year one, and even in year one, or year two, I should say, is that target share going to be enough for him to surpass wide receiver 24 enough? You know, at the end of the day, if you're a rebuilding team, I don't know if I'm paying this price. If I'm a contending team, I do think there's enough upside there in year one of this window to go out and buy Jordan Addison. But a player that I'm much more willing to buy, I'm not even really sure why. I can't. Maybe we'll put the pieces together as we talk about this. But somebody who I'm more in on at cost from the Seattle Seahawks, Jaxon Smith Njigba, right behind him at wide receiver 25. So let's talk JSN in year two.
Man, I'm so in on JSN this year. It's unbelievable. I think we talked about on the show. I made a trade last year at the end of the year. It was Kyron for JSN straight up. Feeling real good about that trade right now. So I need JSN to put it together, but I'm feeling good about that one. But so JSN, okay, so just to touch on Addison real quick. The reason why I don't like Addison from a long-term play, his upside feels capped. It feels like his absolute ceiling is like a Devontae Smith, really good receiver, a guy you kind of want in your teams, but he's never going to be that game-breaking receiver because AJ Brown is there, and AJ Brown's not locked up too. So that's kind of one of the reasons I'm not as in on Addison. For JSN, on the other hand, I think we have to really talk about the coaching malpractice in Seattle last year. I'm so serious when I say this. Pete Carroll is obsessed with this 12 personnel thing. He's obsessed with it. He loves running the ball. He loves his tight ends. He loves throwing to them. He loves blocking with them. I just feel like the offense that he wanted to run is just outdated. I feel like I'm watching a 2005 offense when I watch the Seahawks sometimes. So I feel like that part of it kind of hindered JSN a little bit in his rookie year. It took him a really long time to kind of even see any glimpse. We saw it a little bit, in that Eagle game. I think it was a Monday night game. We saw him kind of flash a little. We've seen the flashes this season, and I think he was everybody's consensus wide receiver one last year in the draft. Everyone loved JSN. Now you're looking forward to what his ceiling could be, what his upside could be in terms of his overall years to come. DK has two years left on his deal. They can get out of his deal after this year if they want to. They'd save 18 mil. But the Tyler Lockett thing's the more interesting one, because people in the offseason was they re-signed Tyler Lockett. JSN is dead. That was a real thing on Twitter. It's JSN dead. They re-signed Tyler Lockett. Not really, because he's getting cut after this year. He is gone. I promise you he's gone unless he re-signs for another year or whatever. But he's going to be dust by then anyway, because he has a $30 million cap hit next year, and they would save $26 million if they cut him. Like he's getting cut. They're going to save. They don't have the only dead cap hit they hit it was $4 million. Like they're going to cut him. So there's just going to be more opportunity for JSN down the line. And if you really believe in the talent, yes, he didn't flash as much as Addison, but I think if we're just looking at the prospect profile, we've been spoiled with all these receivers who's produced in year one. Going just Puka this year. You got kind of a little bit more years back, but you got JJ producing year one. You got Jamar Chase producing year one. Like sometimes it's just like we've been so spoiled with these guys smashing right away. Like maybe that's just not the same for anybody. I don't know if anyone ever thought of that, but I think JSN it could just be year two, and I don't think that's a problem. So I'm totally in on JSN at this price. Definitely over Addison as a guy I would prefer.
Yeah, I understand that in the long run, face plants generally don't pan out. But sometimes you just got to put the context together and realize that he was horribly misused. He had 7th most screen targets among receivers. 36% of his targets were behind the line of scrimmage. And you look at his reception perception chart, and there was a ton of green. He's winning all over the field, but he's hardly used downfield. They started changing that later on in the season. His numbers did improve when he fully healed from his wrist injury and was immersed into the offense in week 6. And Ryan Grubbs is going to take this team to the promised land in terms of what this team is used to with Shane Waldron, because it's going to be a lot more 11 personnel, a lot more aligned to the talents of this team. And Jaxon Smith Njigba has an easy path to overtaking Tyler Lockett this year. And in this offense, if we expect the passing volume to be where it is, if we expect JSN to get this improved role, top 24 upside is very, very easy to come by. It's very easy to talk yourself into that kind of upside for Jaxon Smith Njigba. So I cannot be. We're so perfectly in line here on JSN, and it seems like a lot of the community is kind of coming around there. We're gonna move on to tight end. We're timing the show perfectly now, so we're gonna spend the rest of the time we have talking about Dalton Kincaid versus Sam LaPorta in year 2. Maybe we could talk about Luke Musgrave if you have an extra few minutes, but let's talk about the tight end 1 versus tight end 2 debate, because at cost, I think we may be opposed to the market. So Kincaid versus LaPorta in year 2. Not talking about who you would rather have at value. Who is the tight end 1 among the two next year?
Man, I think I came on this show, like, I forget what month it was, but I was like out there speaking. I'm like, dude, I think if you put Kincaid in Detroit, like he probably does exactly the same thing, if not better. Like, I just think Kincaid's just that kind of player. Like, I'm not saying LaPorta is bad. He's the tight end 1 on Keep Your Cut for a reason. I'm not saying he's bad, but I just feel like Kincaid's game is more, I would say, it's just like he's just a better like receiver. Like, I think if LaPorta doesn't catch all those touchdowns, like touchdowns you can't really predict, year in and year out. Like sometimes you're gonna have, maybe 4, sometimes you're gonna have 12. I think maybe in LaPorta's case, in an offense like this, it's a different situation for more like we were always kind of like the Mike Evans thing, where it's like, okay, he can't do this every year, but he does it every year because he scores touchdowns. That's kind of his game. But I just think Kincaid, like especially like a PPR setting, like he's going to smash LaPorta in terms of targets and catches this year. I don't even think that's really debatable. Like he's going to smash those numbers of what LaPorta is going to do. It's just the touchdowns is what kind of keeps LaPorta going. And we'll see how many touchdowns Kincaid catches this year. I just think Kincaid's an overall better receiver. And at the end of the day, give me the guy who's the better receiver. He's also connected to Josh Allen. Yes, Goff's he's a really good quarterback too. But I feel like the upside for Kincaid, we haven't seen the best of Kincaid yet. Like he had a good rookie season last year. Some of the Dawson Knox numbers when he plays and Kincaid, they're not great. But I mean, if Kincaid even like hits what we're projecting him to do, where like I think he's coming off the board on underdog at like I think he's tight end 4 right now. I could be wrong. It's tight end 4, tight end 3. I forget exactly, but I just think Kincaid has a ceiling where like does LaPorta have a better season than he had last year, especially when you consider the fact, like, they're going to add somebody on this team eventually. Like if J-Mo breaks out, like we're kind of like hoping that he will this year. I think that's going to hurt LaPorta. Obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown is still there. Sounds like Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get more involved in the passing game. And like, what happens next year if, maybe J-Mo doesn't work out and they just go and they draft another first round receiver? Like, that's going to hurt LaPorta. We're like, I think Kincaid, you can make the same argument. Like, Diggs isn't there this year, but they're probably going to add. They draft Keon Coleman, but I still think Kincaid's still going to be the guy there. So I just feel like LaPorta had a very, very good season last year. No one is taking that away from him. I just think, can we get any higher than what we saw last year from LaPorta? Where you at on this? Do you like Kincaid? You like LaPorta?
Do you remember Eric Ebron in 2018?
Oh, the GOAT. Yeah, Colts. That was a great season. I had him in fantasy.
13 touchdowns, just blew everyone's tits off out of nowhere.
He sucked for like 5 years on the Lions. Not 5 years, but yeah.
But he had a 20% red zone target share last season, or that season. I'd be interested to like actually run an analysis to see what the average finish is for a tight end that is able to get 20% of a team's red zone targets, because to put it in perspective, Diggs is what we would call a red zone target hog, and he had 24%. So having nearly a quarter or a fifth of your team's red zone targets is a very significant amount. We are ready for that with Kincaid. It's going to happen. I'll put money down right now. 20% plus red zone target share for Dalton Kincaid. He'll probably lead all tight ends in red zone targets. He'll probably have 20 to 25. And he has the potential to have an outlier touchdown season, just like Sam LaPorta just did with 10 receiving touchdowns. That's why I didn't go. It was too easy just to paint the picture to just last year, but he was number 2 in slot snaps. Kincaid was. Should expect that to continue. And we saw the potential in week 7 when he put up, I think like 15 fantasy points. And then we saw a offensive coordinator transition. We had some drama with Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen not connecting. The offense was struggling. So that's a lot to actually have to go through as a rookie tight end coming into the league. And it was very clear when we saw Kincaid in bunches, like, oh, if he gets a more featured role in this offense, he's going to explode. And then they literally got rid of their number 1 target earner and replaced him with Keon Coleman. They got rid of their number 2 target earner as a receiver, replaced him with Curtis Samuel. This offense, we could see how many targets did LaPorta have last year? 120? We could see 140 for Kincaid. We could see 140 targets, 150.
100%.
So I agree with you that I think after this year, it's just going to be flipped, and we're going to have tight end 1 Dalton Kincaid, tight end 2 Sam LaPorta, and it's going to keep flip-flopping for as long as they continue to do this, unless Kyle Pitts. That
was the other
name. Could be tight end 1 at the end of the
season.
That
was the other name I was thinking of, where it's like if Kyle Pitts has like
he's basically a sophomore.
Yeah, he's a sophomore in terms of like how we've been drafting him. But yeah, I mean, if Kyle Pitts has a monster year, like let's say Kyle Pitts goes out there, puts up like something like 1,400 yards or something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like, then he's the tight end 1, even though he's a little bit older. Like he's still young, actually. He's only 20. Let's see. I think he's my age. I think he's only 20. He's 23 or 24. Like he's still really young.
Yeah, absolutely. He, I saw a tweet that said at this point in Kyle Pitts' career, Kyle Pitts at his age, Travis Kelce was still, it was either 4 or 10 months away from his first NFL reception.
Yep.
So he is still incredibly young. And truly, he had an incredible rookie season and then had some extenuating circumstances that really just, you got to be able to write off sometime. So like technically he's a sophomore. So our surprise 10th sophomore value is Kyle Pitts. Jordan Addison is maybe a half of value because he's not really a value, but he is somebody who could perform very well in his sophomore year. And then we gave you Devon A-Chain as a little insert, but 54 minutes, Tyler, we did it. Let's wrap up and close the show with plugs. And if you have a bold prediction on your heart, go for it. But what do you got to plug these days?
Plugging, I got I'm going live on the Fantasy Football Fellas literally in 5 minutes over on their channel. Fantasy Football Fellas doing a super flex, a underdog draft. Then I'm going live on my channel. Go toss me a sub if you would be so kind at PPR Tyler on YouTube, at PPR Tyler on Twitter. We're going live on my channel at 8:15 p.m. whenever that show gets done that I'm doing after this. So doing a couple of different streams today, but that's the life that we choose, right? So
Absolutely.
really excited to do that. Got some stuff for the draft kit coming out for a player profile. So make sure you go get the draft kit. I wrote up a couple players today. Romeo Dubs stock down, and so go check all that out. And bold prediction. Ooh, let's stay on course with Kyle Pitts. I want to talk about Kyle Pitts. Let's go. Kyle Pitts finishes as the tight end 1 overall this year.
That is a bold prediction. And I was going to do that thing where I just closed the show and then the mouse was on end stream and not the end screen.
Yeah,
so I had to just quick reel that back. I will do my weekly plugs here real quick before we end the show. Player Profiler today. I am the Saturday host. Tyler, what day do you host again, Tyler? Is it Monday?
Yeah, I should have plugged that Monday.
So Tyler's there on Monday. Player Profiler News YouTube channel and the Profiler_NFL Twitter. You can go find that there. As Tyler mentioned, I will also have some stuff from the draft kit coming out. And finally, the Win Your League series is out for Player Profiler. So we just dropped breakout offenses today. Theo Greminger, Seth Dewald, Matty Kiwoom, Jason Allwine, and myself, each responding with a couple paragraphs to a prompt each week. We've done rookie sleeper. We've done breakout offenses. There's another one I'm forgetting, but we're going to continue throughout the rest of the offseason with that. And then also I'm going to have an article dropping on Monday talking about rookie values in Dynasty startup drafts. I compared keep trade cuts, crowdsource rankings to sleepers ADP to identify some value pockets. And a little teaser, fellow Falcon, Tyler, your boy, Michael Penix Jr. is the biggest value among rookies in Dynasty startups right now. My bold prediction is that Deontay Johnson finishes the season as a top 16 receiver.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.